Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Well, Emmet O'Neill decided to leave his career in online education behind to follow a journey of developing apps for children through the business StoryToys. And what a journey it has been. Commercial success, rebounding from the possibility of liquidation, and to working with Lego and Disney. Emmet, who is now the CEO of StoryToys, joins us to share the incredible journey on this morning's show. But Emmet, what triggered your decision to leave the world of online education behind?
Delighted to be on. It was a difficult decision at the time because I've worked in education and education-related businesses for many years. I was doing making some really interesting products with a company called Houghton Mifflin, the largest educational publisher in the world, US-based but have offices in Ireland. I was making all sorts of things, had a huge team, massive budgets, and was having a lot of fun. But one aspect of the business that I was working on was making children's apps. So the App Store had just come out, the iPad had just come out, and I was really, really enjoying working in that space versus the much wider role that I held at the time. So, my brother actually was running an app business on the other side of town called StoryToys, and he was building a great business that was solely focused on making children's apps. And I think if we hadn't been brothers, we would have probably joined forces sooner. But basically, after looking at his success develop, I thought, you know what, this is something I'd like to be a part of as well. Yeah, the rest, as I say, is history.
And when you joined the business, its key focus was on developing apps for children. But where did you see that there was growth opportunities for StoryToys beyond that?
I think they were doing some very interesting products at the time. They were basically making these interactive pop-up books, and they were based around public domain IP, Hansel and Gretel and Little Red Riding Hood, all of that sort of thing. And they had a lovely technology. They had a great team, but what I felt they really needed to do was two things: develop some original content, with potentially an educational angle, and also introduce licenses into their offering as well. So when I say licenses, I mean basically, third-party IP that basically we would then translate across into our app framework.
And talk to us about the success which the company enjoyed when it collaborated with the hit 1960s book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic getting to work with Eric Carle and his team, his brilliant creative director. And basically what we were trying to do, what I'm trying to do with any app is always to try and take the original thing and bring it to life as it would exist in the imagination of a child. So whether it's a 1960s book or whether it's a toy or whatever it might be, we're always just trying to kind of catch the essence of what the original author meant, and then bring that to life in a way that a kid can interact with it. So when Hungry Caterpillar came along, we originally had a bit of back and forth with them over, they wanted to do something that was flat and very close to the book. We pushed quite hard, and we eventually persuaded them to let us make a 3D character that was fully interactive, and basically was like a kind of virtual pet that you could feed, nurture and grow, and without spoiling the book for you, eventually turn into a butterfly. So we brought that out, and honestly we wound up, that app achieved remarkable success. It picked every major industry prize at the time, and actually ultimately a spin-off of the app wound up on stage at Apple's WWDC, which is their big event every year. Wound up in advertising campaigns. We had a lot of success through that app, but really it was about a very central focus, which was basically making something come to life as an extension of the brand as the child believes it should exist,
But then the industry changed as people no longer wanted to pay for the apps that they were downloading to their devices. How did that impact the business at the time?
Well, to be fair, it was a new and emerging platform. We were having to pivot the business model on a very, very frequent basis. And, as I mentioned, my brother Barry was the CEO at the time, and he did a very good job at navigating us through those changing waters. It went from basically a premium model where you would buy something up front, as you said, and then basically a freemium model emerged where you'd give a certain amount of content away for free, and then the user could decide to purchase additional items. So we moved around between those models. But yeah, as you say, it did the changes certainly led to some products that we had brought out with premium and be suffering, you know.
You mentioned the need to constantly pivot the business and navigate those changing waters. I think it's probably the biggest challenge that most businesses have, that they find it so difficult to do that. Have you any advice for them in that regard?
The best thing you can do is be straight up and honest with your team. And Barry always managed that very well. And I tried to do that with the team I was running. I was basically running all of the product side of things. And, it was basically just people will do anything for you if they have the context and they believe in what you're saying. And so ultimately, by sharing with people without frightening them, but sharing with them what was required for success and why it was important for us to zig when we've been zagging. That's kind of been the key. Like, just taking people on the journey with you, being honest and being straight up. In as much as I said, not terrifying your staff by letting them know how little's actually left in the bank account, but basically just being straight about the need to change, the need to navigate. You find people can be very flexible and really get behind you on that journey.
And on the topic of the bank account, StoryToys then encountered quite a turbulent period financially. What triggered these financial challenges?
I think, it's easy to say these things with 20/20 hindsight, but I would say we probably pursued too many different directions simultaneously. We did that with investor money, and so we had a lot of things on, and probably more things than we were able to focus on. And we probably grew some things quicker and in a non-organic way that was basically not sustainable. So I think it's a pretty classic mistake that startups tend to make. But we survived it, which I suppose is the main thing with the story,
And just as the business was on the brink of being liquidated, an email from Lego changed the company's fortunes. So how did that opportunity develop?
I mean, it literally was an email that arrived into info at StoryToys, and with these things, when you're in the thick of it, you don't always check. You don't always check your spam folder. You don't always check your info at address. But yeah, fortunately, something arrived in, and it was an opportunity to participate in an RFP process, so a request for proposal. They were making new product. And they were going out to a number of vendors. They had seen Hungry Caterpillar and liked it. So it was a consultant for the Lego Group who got in touch with us and, asked us to take part. Fortunately, we were successful in our process, and the rest is history. I mean, we ultimately developed after that RFP an app called Lego Duplo World. And that launched in November 2019. It's just coming up on its 5-year anniversary.
And what other well-known brands and franchises has StoryToys worked with?
Even within the Lego Duplo range of products, we launched Lego Duplo Marvel in 2021, Lego Duplo Disney in 2023, Lego Duplo Peppa Pig in just May of this year. So even within the Lego Duplo context, we've actually done quite a few. But I would that. Prior to Lego, we were working with the Walt Disney Company. We have a big app with them, which actually has Disney IP, Pixar IP, basically every Disney thing you can imagine pretty much is in there. We also work with Hasbro, Mattel, obviously Penguin Random House through Hungry Caterpillar, Sesame Street, but we've kind of basically worked with everybody. I mean, we've worked with Warner Brothers at one point in time. We worked with Nickelodeon and another. Effectively everybody in the kids industry.
And Emmet, what have you learned from working with companies of that size and scale?
Well, it's actually a lovely thing to work with businesses like that, because we get to dip in and we get to be a part of their world, but very much on our own terms. So we license. We don't make products directly for them. We license their characters, and then we make the products we believe that these brands need, and that kids and fans of these brands would desire. So So basically, in that licensing relationship, you're creating your vision for them, but of course you're doing it with their approval processes and working in tandem really with them. And so each one brings something different to the table. You'll learn something different from working with the Lego Group to working with Marvel Entertainment or indeed Sesame Street. I think with every one of them has brought some little understanding of how that corner of the universe operates, whether it be more with a toy focus or a TV show focus or even a publishing focus. You get a little bit of something from every one of them. And that's why I love this job.
I know that you've been involved and experienced a lot of acquisitions over the years, but probably the most successful one is when StoryToys was subsequently acquired by Team 17. So how did this move actually transform the business?
Well, it was like the Team 17 acquisition, that happened in July, I think, 21. And Barry had transitioned by that point to the chairman role on the board, and I was actively running the business as CEO. But he introduced me to Debbie Bestwick, and Debbie Bestwick was basically the CEO of Team 17 at the time. StoryToys was doing really well, so Barry introduced Debbie to me with the view that she could give us advice on potentially how we might float StoryToys, or even ultimately the journey of private equity that she'd taken along the way. So it was very much a casual. It came about through a sort of a casual intro, but ultimately during the course of the conversations, it moved from sort of casual intro to, philosophically, we have a lot of things in common here. We're trying to achieve a lot of similar goals. For me, Team 17, they had a heavy focus on family-oriented games, not necessarily just producing, first-person shooters, that sort of thing. So there was a really nice fit. So after kind of kicking the tires for a while and exploring things, we went down the route, and as I said, were acquired by them a little over 3 years ago. But the thing is, the business they acquired was actually, quite a small, rough around the edges startup in many ways. We had rapid revenue growth, and we'd grown our people quite substantially, but we were still very much, we still had a lot to figure out. And honestly, Team 17, the mentorship that I was given by Debbie Bestwick in terms of advice on how to grow the business, the pitfalls to avoid, that, and she always said it wasn't because she was a business genius, but because she'd fallen into every one of them along the way, and actually just having that mentor along the way to grow it through the next stage was fun. So that's why it was a very successful acquisition. There was no attempt to change the StoryToys culture. There was no attempt to sort of just mush the two companies together. It was about, okay, how can we grow this company in parallel to our own business and make sure they get the learning and guidance that we've had along the way.
On a macro level, what could the Irish government do to improve the digital video and app development industry in Ireland?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something I've leaned into quite a lot recently, particularly with regards to the games tax credit, which, as you know, is modelled on the film credit, and basically there's a lot that they've got right about it. There's a lot that needs to change. The issue is, though, when the credit was initially looked into, which was pushed for by Games Development Ireland, I think, at the time, and basically that was about, it must be 15 years ago, almost 15 years ago at this stage, that they were pushing for that credit. By the time the credit actually came through, the industry had moved on, but also there were fewer companies in a position to actually avail of it. So StoryToys has successfully received the games tax credit, but there's very few other companies that have. So I actually think it's the early stage and mid-sized companies that particularly need support, So that's everything from business incubation centres right the way through to, mentorship programs, training. But critically, like if you look at the Irish animation industry and what they did, what particularly Screen Ireland did there, in terms of things like their framework scheme, whereby small companies were able to sort of really establish a style, get their studio on the map by basically making a calling card, a short film in that instance. Schemes like that will enable basically the brown bag films of tomorrow to emerge from the Irish game scene.
Since Team 17 acquired StoryToys in July 2021, the business has trebled in size. But what do the future growth plans for the business look like, and how will you achieve that?
So I think, again, my very basic approach of growing the product pipeline, growing the studio numbers, bringing in new licenses into StoryToys, getting the products out on new and emerging platforms. All of those things are really, really exciting to me.
And in terms of emerging platforms, what are you most excited about in that regard?
It's an interesting one. Like when I remember when my kids were young, basically every movie that came out, every TV show would have a game available on Nintendo Wii and Nintendo DS. And when the iPad came out, it really really ate up that market. And then the next generation of consoles came out. They were way more expensive, and kind of kids left that console space behind somewhat. You might see something interesting happening in the not too distant future, where Nintendo release. There's rumors of their next big console. We might find a lot of Switches going into the hands of younger kids. I think that could be quite interesting. Basically, consoles in the hands of kids again. I think that's exciting. But I also think that even just subscription platforms that allow children access in a really safe way, Apple Arcade, I think that's pretty exciting. I think those as platforms, I wouldn't underestimate those either.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.